This is how I made my Miss All Sunday cosplay in just 1 week to celebrate her introduction in the One Piece live action. Starting with the top, I began by cutting out my pattern. This was just a regular shirt lace-up pattern that I got from Etsy, but it ended up working out really well for Miss All Sunday. The pattern is my least favorite part of this process because I find it so time-consuming, but once it's finally cut out and put together, it's ready to go and I can start putting it on the fabric. But when the pieces are cut out, the worst is over and I can finally start putting things together until I realized that I was missing a little bit of a part. So here is an update from me.
Okay, here's a real-time update from me. I did make a little bit of a mistake. The pattern does say cut 4 and cut 2 on the back, and I kind of disregarded it. I watched the girl's video. I was like, I don't understand why she needs all this. I didn't want to do a lining. I didn't want to worry about using more fabric, and I kind of disregarded it because of that. But now, as I was putting the pieces together, I understand that I was trying to figure out how I would close these raw edges, and when she did in the video, it's because she double lined it and then flipped it inside out so you didn't have to worry about raw edges. I'm sure you could probably use bias tape for this, but that is a skill that I have yet to conquer, and I am not feeling brave. I'm not working with time like that today, so I am just now cutting additional pieces so that I don't have to worry about raw edges on this shirt anymore.
So once that was sorted, I sewed both pieces together around the sides and the top, leaving the bottom open so that I could flip it inside out. And I did this for both side pieces as well as the back piece. I then trimmed down the seam allowance so that it wouldn't be so bulky underneath when I flipped it all right side out, and then it was time to flip all the pieces. I gave it a careful iron, and then it was time to put all the pieces together so that I could start sewing it into one singular shirt. And here was the try-on before the eyelets went in. The bottom edges were still raw, so I did a little bit of a hem at the bottom just so that they were all covered. I sewed that together, and then the final step was to do the eyelets. This was my first time doing this. I'm not the happiest with how it turned out. I think next time I might try the hammer method because my hand was cramping so badly for a week after doing this. It hurt so badly. But now let's move on to the skirt. I started by tracing my pattern and then cutting out all the pieces. Then it was time to put in the zipper. What I did was I put right sides together and sewed up as best as I could along the sides so that the zipper was covered, mostly. Here was the first try on. She definitely needed some length taken off, so let's do that. I measured approximately how much length I wanted taken off. I was able to go a bit shorter because I knew that the fringe was going to go on next, so it would give me a little bit of the length back. Again, I put right sides together because that way when it flips back over after sewing it on, all these seams are hidden underneath. This fringe was also quite long, so I also did cut some length off of that very slowly, making sure to get all the layers the best that I could. And here's the try on. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I didn't do a waistband because I hate doing waistbands, so I kind of just hemmed the top. And here is the try on with the shirt. I think it turned out really well and it got done really fast, so we're moving on to the jacket now. Again, cutting out my pattern. I actually could not find a proper jacket pattern that I liked, so what I ended up using was on Etsy, I found a pattern for a long cardigan, and I kind of just used that as the jacket. This pattern was like 40 pages, so it took quite a while to cut and put together, but soon enough, I had it all done and was ready to get started. I traced and cut out both layers of the fabric, so the outside white fashion layer as well as the lining, and what I did was I used a wide zigzag stitch on the edges of them just to close them up, especially on the satin because it was fraying quite a bit, and this just made it a little bit easier to work with. They were both quite wrinkly though, so I gave them a little bit out of an iron quickly before I moved on. And then this is where things went wrong, so I'm going to try and explain this to you the best that I can. Okay, so the mistake that I made in that video was sewing the white part, the fashion layer, and the red part, the lining, together. And what happens is if you do this for each piece, so both side panels and the back, once you put your faux fur in, you can't flip it inside out because they're already attached at both sides. What you need to do instead is sew all of the lining to each other and sew all of the white fashion layers to each other. That way they're not connected in the center seams and you can still flip them inside out. The best way I can explain this is that this white layer and the red layer inside are totally separate. They are not connected in the middle. I could pull these two pieces apart on both sides because they are not connected at the center seams to anything but each other. So what you're going to do is putting the right sides of the fabric together, you're going to sew the lining together, and then you're going to do the same thing on the white side. Right sides together and sewing the fashion layer together. Basically, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with two separate pieces. You're going to end up with the white piece that looks like a jacket, and you're also going to end up with a same looking red piece. That only place that you are sewing the red and the white piece together is when you put the fur on, and I will explain that when we get to this step. I just want to make sure that you guys don't make the same mistake that I did, because what happened is when I sewed these side seams together, when I sewed this red piece to this white piece, what happens is they connected both in the middle. So when I sewed it to the back piece, all of a sudden there's this big block that prevents me from being able to flip it back inside out. And then the only option that I would have been left with is visible seams on the inside, which I didn't personally want. When you've gotten all of that sorted, then you can move on to the faux fur. For me, I know that my machine cannot handle the thickness or volume of faux fur, so what I do is I cut out the seam allowance from the faux fur. So I just take a pair of scissors or hair shears and just cut it down really small. And then because it's being used as a trim, what I do is I match both of those seam allowances up to each other, and I just kind of sew them into a sort of tube so that I can now pin them between both the lining and the fashion layer. You want to have the right sides of the lining and the fashion layer together so that when you start to sew it, when you flip it inside out, the fur will look like it's coming from the inside and all the stitching will be on the inside rather than visible from the outside. Again, from past experience, I know that my sewing machine cannot handle the bulk of this, so what I had to do is I had to hand sew both on the sides, at the top, and the bottom where all the fur trim was going. Then it was time for sleeves. For both sleeves, I put right sides together and just kind of sewed up the center to make them into these long tubes. Turning the jacket right side out, I basically put the sleeve through where the armhole would be and attached it to both the lining and the fashion layer so that it would look like a sleeve. And here is it when it was done. I don't have a clip of it, but I had to do this on both arms. The seams were visible from inside the arm, but I didn't really care that much. It wasn't the end of the world for me. So then I flipped the entire jacket right side out, and here is what it looked like with all of the fur trim as well as with the sleeves on. I was really happy with how it looked so far. The last part is to add the faux fur around the neck as well as to the sleeve cuffs. With the neck, because that's where my opening was to turn the jacket right side out, the stitching did have to be visible, but it's okay because I knew it would be hidden by me wearing it as well as by my wig, so it wasn't a big deal to me. I just did the same thing as I did before, put it between both the fashion layer and the lining, and then hand sewed it all together. For the cuffs, I just did a single layer, so I clipped them on right sides together like I did with the skirt trim, and I was able to sew it with the machine, and this is how it turned out. I was really in a rush at this point, so I won't show you how I did any of the jacket decorations because I will be redoing them. I want to properly put my time into actually making them look the way that I wanted to, so for now we'll skip forward to the last part, which is the hat. I had this leftover golden cord that I've been dying to get rid of, so I just bought a white base hat and I cut little pieces like this. I actually ended up cutting them smaller than this, and I just glued them all around the rim of the hat just with hot glue, using the sewing clips to keep them in place. And here is how the hat ended up looking. I was pretty happy with it, and then I did a full try on of both the jacket and the hat. I was very happy with. The arm decorations are okay, but I do want to do the full back decorations when I have more time to work with. Here's the final result. I'm so happy with how she turned out considering the short timeline. That's all for this video, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you all enjoyed seeing Miss All Sunday in the live action.